story? What are they trying to say? The qualities of the story, and basically attributing them to my feminine hero, and my protagonist, and her embodying what those stories were trying to tell. So a lot of like the warrior kind of attributes I would just give to my women and interpret that in a kind of a feminine way, but also a masculine way, just to show that we can be tender and soft, but also be that kind of strong person and have our own mind. And actually, it's not about the man choosing us, but like realizing our own power and then seeing a partner who we can live life with rather than them making our life.
Yeah, I mean that just comes across so strongly in the stories and kind of notion of reimagining, which is kind of like a literary trend, but you've really brilliantly done it in the book.
Thank you.
And last summer we were treated to your debut novel, Honey and Spice. For those who haven't had a chance to read the book, can you tell us a bit about what the story is?
Yeah, Honey and Spice is a collegiate romance set in an ACS in the southern England, centering on a young woman who because I started writing this book like 4 years ago, but in today's world it would be like a podcast. But in the novel, it's a campus radio station where she kind of gives romantic advice in the backdrop of like soul and R&B, and that's her passion. And she has a fair bit of like, a little bit of trauma, and she doesn't date, and she kind of keeps herself away from that kind of the student body. And then somebody very handsome, a peng waist man, comes to scatter everything, and she's like, well, I taught you girls better than this. And the story is about them clashing, but also her growth, his growth, how they grow together. And not just her like falling in love, because it's a love story, but also her falling in love with herself, but also her falling in love with community and the possibility of friendship and intimacy with other women.
Yeah, and it's so brilliantly done. Like, I love radio. Like, I actually really like the setting being kind of this collegiate space, the radio of it, the kind of manner in which Kiki can express herself in that way that has the barrier between her. She's quite a guarded character. But as you said, the kind of dynamic between Malachi and Kiki is obviously the heart of the story. It's a love story, but they have this clash of personalities, the honey and spice of it, but they're inexorably drawn together. How do you go about crafting romantic characters and thinking about their dynamics? Where do you begin? And what's most important to you about getting it right in a story like this? Do you think that adversarial kind of element is key to a romantic tale?
Yeah, I think so. So in the romance landia, it's called like enemies to lovers, right? I've never been a fan of like when they just hate each other and suddenly they love each other. So for me, it was first of all crafting a believable chemistry where there is friction, but not because they're so different and they genuinely hate each other. It's because they challenge each other. And then when those barriers come down, that challenging becomes like them getting along, and it's actually like an awe, and they grow together. And fundamentally, they also really like each other. So because Malachi and Kiki, they actually have a lot of similarities, but they're very kind of, the way they go about things is different. And I really enjoyed writing that. And in the way that I kind of create their chemistry is the woman first. I always work on her first, who her personality is, her own goals, how she can grow, her flaws. I guess she has to have some. Her flaws, and then who is the partner who, of course, will get along with her and all of that good stuff, but also who's going to help her grow and who is going to add to her life. That's really important to me, because I'm like, okay, they like each other, but what is the thing? Like, what bonds them together? I don't even see them being friends. I really work on their friendship as well. I think that in all romances I write, the friendship is key. For me, that's the romance, because that's what you build the romance on, that foundation of friendship. And so I do a lot of character work. I write so many conversations, some that might not even end up in the book, because I'm just trying to get into their rhythm and their pattern, and conversations of like, literally, like, when was your first kiss? And when I'm in that kind of zone, whether it ends up in the book or not, I feel like it bleeds into the book, you know?
Yeah, because you kind of, I like the idea of you kind of doing conversations that might not make into the book, because you build that chemistry, you've created these characters, and then it's like, okay, now interact, let's see what happens. And the chemistry is explosive. I'm a chemistry girly, like, romance stories don't work for me if you can't feel that crackling on the page. So obviously you have nailed it. And this book has such a strong voice in Kiki, and a really unique sense of humour that comes through your writing. I mean, obviously, if anyone's encountered Bolu in other spaces on social media, through her work, you know she has this brilliant sense of humour and wit, and it really comes through in the book. What do you think is the special relationship between romance and comedy? And why is it important to have those qualities in your writing? What's the deal with romantic comedy?
Like, romance is humiliating. It's so embarrassing. And I'm a Yoruba babe, so like, it's just so cringe to like be that open with somebody else, and it's just inherently embarrassing. And I feel like part of being a human is being able to laugh at that. Because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. You know, I think life is either very tragic or like it's like comedic, and I feel like humor is such a great coping mechanism, and humor is also a great lens to expose our vulnerabilities in a really relatable way. So for me, they just go hand in hand. And also, romance can be hard, but it's also can feel so light and so freeing, and it's so fun, and so comedy just naturally marries with it. But yeah, you just have to like emotionally strip yourself naked, and I think humor is a great way to show that, really. And also for me, so much of romance is laughter. I think when you're falling in love, it's just like this kind of person make you laugh, and laughing is such a great example of your soul being free and being unguarded. So I feel like romance and comedy are just like very closely entwined for me.
That's so beautiful. And I think laughing just releases certain, I don't know, endorphins or whatever, that can be similar to other feelings. So I think I totally agree, it's really important. And it always bothers me when things are sold as a romantic comedy and you're like, this ain't funny.
Don't get me started. That is my pet peeve.
You need both. You need to do both well, which Bolu, of course, does. Now, am I right in thinking there's a sequel coming to Honey and Spice? It's going to be maybe a little bit longer than we might have hoped, but keep your eyes peeled for it.
Guys.
Not too long. 2025. It's not that far away.
Yeah.
But are you comfortable talking a bit about how you've evolved?
Sure.
This kind of story and what we can expect from it?
Definitely. Well, yeah, I love Malachi and Kiki for so many reasons. My friends say that like it's because Kiki is just like a kind of me.
Avatar.
Like an avatar, yeah, exactly. I don't think so. I'm not that narcissistic. But yeah, I love them. I just didn't feel like they were dumb. And I was very fascinated with the idea of, okay, you falling in love with your university sweetheart. What happens next? Does their love survive? How does it survive? Do they grow apart? You know, you grow up, you know, and you're no longer in this kind of campus collegiate varsity bubble where everything is concentrated, including emotions. So Summer the Skin, which is I think that's the title. Yeah, it's 8 years in the future. I'm trying to think of what I can say without spoiling it. It's 8 years in the future, on from Honey and Spice, so it's closer to like present day. And they're like pushing 30, and you know they've gone through a lot in their lives, and I don't know if I'm trying to think of what I can say.
That is enticing enough.
It's a wedding. It's a wedding in the core of the story. It is a second chance romance. If you read romances, you know what that means. And it's a lot more adult. And I'm not gonna lie, like when I'm in the middle of writing it at the moment, I'm nearly finished. But I was like, oh gosh, I hope people are gonna be like, because I'm grown up now. I've grown up since writing Honey and Spice, and they're grown up, so it's not gonna be exactly the same as Honey and Spice. It's a lot more mature. That in the real world now, and it's still gonna have like the beats. It's Malachi and Kiki. It's Malachi and Kiki, so that you know what to expect, but it's a lot more grown up, and yeah, it's more, I guess, more serious, which is natural because they're in the real world now.
Serious things.
Things get real when you're out.
Like, I guess it's time to get real. Yeah. That's so exciting. I think people love to, once they fall in love with the characters and characters being together, getting to kind of evolve and grow with them is just wonderful, and getting to kind of dive back into their world.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to read it.
Thank you.
And I know your fans will be too. But I kind of wanted to delve into a bit of romantic theory. We've already touched on some of it, but kind of the ideas that you've been positing as you delve into writing romantic stories. You have this brilliant passage in Netflix and Chill that brilliantly encapsulates, I've said brilliant so many times today, sorry, that encapsulates a lot of the tensions and the notion of romance through Temi, the character in the story, through her lens. And I'd like to read a bit of it. I'm going to read slowly because of this whole thing. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it and then we can talk a bit about it. So in the story she says, romance was a high-risk emotional expense. I didn't have space for it. I wasn't willing to make space for it. There's something about romantic trust that gives intimate power to its object. You can have many friends, but traditionally romance is a narrower scope. It has the element of being chosen. Its object has something over you. It knows you've been separated from an awe of technical potentials. With the right person, that should feel like a privilege. In the wrong hands, a license to exploit. If the wrong hands are attached to a canny brain, it means they'll work out that the more they make themselves chosen, the more they can get. I think that's so incredibly...
Dang, I wrote that.
Come on, snaps for that. Building from that, as black people, as black women, the stereotype, as you've already talked about a little bit, is perhaps that we aren't soft. We aren't the centre of romantic endeavours. The popular imagination might see us, as you've said, as caregivers or harlots or harridans. And Temi and later Kiki are women who are somewhat defensive of the idea of love, and then they have their defences broken down. So what do you think is important about the portrayal of black women in romantic settings, be that on the page or the stage or the screen? And to Temi's point in the extract from Netflix and Chill, do you think that there's a sense of power exchange? How does that affect how we view as black women falling in love and romantic relationships?
It can feel, I think in general, it can feel like a power exchange, especially if you're dating men. Because of course there's like this patriarchy, all of that good stuff. It feels like you're relinquishing something, especially if you're a woman who values, her mind and everything. And there's something that's, and I blame, obviously, patriarchy may seem this way, but like romance is seen as weak, and leaning into it seems like it's weak, and tenderness seems like it's weak. And so in doing that, you feel like you're letting something go. And that's what we're taught. It's kind of either or. It's either you're an independent woman or you like soft life. That's just it. And I feel like it's really important for me to show the complexity of black women, because all the black women I know, honestly, some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. So funny, so driven, so ambitious, and also so tender, and also seeking that love. and their life is full of love in their friendships and their family, but also they want romantic love. And I feel like sometimes they find that hard to admit because they feel like it's almost letting themselves down and what they've achieved down and their own ambition down. And I really wanted to show that tension in my work. And I wrote that when I was 24, 25, around that age. And even in the beginning, that's based on something that I wrote when I was like 17. So I think that's why I'll write about a 17-year-old, because I was in that space. And I was feeling it then as well, because I was like, boys are a distraction as well. But I was so focused on my work, and I was so focused, especially boys that age. I saw it. I saw that they were a waste of time because they wanted it, and they would take my attention as something that, as almost something to as a power over me, and it was something to win, and it wasn't about me as a person. So yeah, that was all of the things that I was grappling with, and in my kind of work, I'm always seeking to show the complexity of Black women, of showing us as tender and soft, but also we can be hard-headed and ambitious, and also sometimes we're flawed. Kiki is very stubborn, and she lashes out when she's hurt, and I feel like sometimes on the flip side of it, we almost try to overcorrect Black women's portrayals and show them as too perfect almost, and we should have the freedom to be flawed as well.
Absolutely. And ambition is something that in my own writing I am also very keen to portray, and If I Don't Have You, I definitely was thinking about a Black woman who her aims and ambitions are almost more important to her than love. Love is inconvenient. And I think that's real, and it's something I can really identify with as a person, but also in writing. Where have I got to? Yeah, so the theme of this talk is around love in the Black imagination. And there's this idea that romance or romantic comedy set up unrealistic expectations or a sense of what we would expect in real life interactions that aren't real. But we do see real life romances. They exist, of course. And you even kind of talk about in Loving Colour your parents' love story. But I wanted to ask you about this and do you think you have to be a fantasist or have a rich fantasy life to be a romance author? We see romantasy as this term that's thrown around a lot in literature at the moment, which obviously is leaning more into actual fantasy fiction. But how much do you tread that line of reality versus fantasy? Do you have to be a fantasist to write this?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think Bell Hooks actually talks about this, and she says that when women talk about what they want is called fantasy, And for me, I'm just writing about a man who loves a woman with respect and is genuinely in awe of her and likes her as a person, who gets on with her. And I'm sorry, that's not fantasy to me. That's not, and I have it in my own life, and I see it with my parents, and I see it in the relationships that I love seeing, and I think it's more of an indictment on the streets, that it's seen as a fantasy, because the spirit of all the romances, obviously there's bits that are I wouldn't even say what they're extra, but it's for instance, I'm trying to think of something that's
heightened.
It. Heightened. I was going to give an example on Honey and Spice. Can I? Yeah.
Please.
So in Honey and Spice, Kiki is a secret. She loves fantasy and romance and all of that good stuff. And Malachi knows she wants to go to a convention celebrating that, and she doesn't want to go. But then he surprises her with tickets, and then dresses up as her favorite character in it. Maybe him dressing up was men might not do that. But that for me, that's the spirit of that, is that a man who's interested in your interest enough to support you in them and also want to indulge you in them. And I don't know, I've experienced that, and I know many women who have experienced that, and I don't think that's out of this world. And even dressing up, I don't think it's that out of this world. But for me, it's just standards, you know? And I think, and it's sad to me that so many like women's romantic standards are seen as being unrealistic when really they're based on a mutual respect and somebody liking you and treating you as an equal and delighting in you, you know?
Definitely, and I think that says a lot about how romantic fiction is viewed and kind of the interpretation of this fiction that largely is read by women as lesser. Does that bother you? Do you ever think about that when you're writing? When you started out, were you considering, I need to write a certain type of fiction, particularly as a black woman, that is interpreted in a highfalutin way?
Never, not for 1 second. I think it was as simple for me as this. I love romance. I love reading romance. I stole Mills and Boon off my mom's bookshelf. When I was 12 years old, my school librarian, who knew my being by name because I was a nerd and I always would stay at lunchtime, gave me a big copy of Pride and Prejudice, and I fell in love. And that was it for me. And then I was like, I think I like reading this, and I think I want to make, and I like making up stories. I'm good at English lit, and I'm good at when they gave you an assignments to make up stories. I want to do this. I'm going to make up the stories that I like to read. And it was as simple as that. And I'm black, so I'm going to write about black women. I had a friend who also enjoyed writing, and she was black. And then she was writing about white characters with like grey eyes as the main protagonist. I was like, but why? But why? I never had that. I never had a fantasy to be white. And even in the stories that I'm writing, it didn't even occur to me to write about white characters because, it just is me, and it's the world that I know. So I didn't. I just wanted to write the truth according to me, basically. And I think that once you start thinking about the audience and in that way and fighting against white supremacy, then white supremacy is almost getting into your mind, because now it's controlling your creativity when really you should be just saying the story that's on your mind and on your heart, you know?
Absolutely. And, I do think of, how with my publisher hat on, there's a pressure for people who are so-called marginalised authors to mind their trauma, mind their kind of the assumptions of what their lives are on the page, and make that the central theme of their writing. But for those of us who are interested in romantic fiction, that doesn't have to mean a separation. I think it's important, hugely important, that we see different types of stories and romantic stories being told. And it's kind of a shame that it feels like there's only a handful of us on the British scene writing.
Sareeta and I have done like a billion panels together.
Telling you is Bolu there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's wild. But if any of you have an inkling to write romantic fiction,
honestly,
truly. So I guess changing things up a bit, wanted to ask you about thirst. Or shall we say feminine desire.
I prefer thirst.
I know that you, like me, were a big fan of the podcast Thirst Aid Kit.
Love it.
Shout out to Bim and Nicole. And you had this kind of notorious run with your former babe, Michael B. Jordan.
That man!
Yeah, but what do you think about that kind of positive objectification? What does it unlock for us when it comes to ideas of love and romance? And if we adhere to a binary, why is it different for men than women?
Yeah, well, we're less gross than men. No, I'm joking. But actually, because the thing about Thirst Aid Kit, what was so interesting about, because imagine if a man had Thirst Aid Kit. Let me tell you what Thirst Aid Kit did. Like, it would choose, like, who's like a internet boyfriend? I don't know. Let's just say Michael B. Jordan, right? And it would write like a scenario about Michael B. Jordan, and it would be as simple as you come home and Michael B. Jordan's cooking for you, and then he's like, what do you want to eat? And it's just like so sweet, and it's just like a man. It's like domesticity, right?
Yes.
It's just like a man treating you well, and it got like sensual, but it never get like raunchy, and it's just talking about like. He looks like he really loved his mum, or he'll love you really tenderly, or like it's more about respect, you know, and just creating a romantic scenario in which you feel safe in. That's the key in it. It's like scenarios where you feel safe with a partner, and it's just fun and it's freeing as well, because as you know, as Black women, it's again either desexualized or hypersexualized, but it's just us celebrating our desire. And I feel like with men, the objectification is more like we are literally objects.
It's more physical.
It's more physical, and it robs us of our humanity. Whereas actually in romantic fantasy, in female romantic fantasy and desire, we are imbuing and projecting our humanity onto this man. And of course it's parasocial, and of course it's not necessarily who this man is, but it's who he represents to us. And it's never gross. Like of course women can be filthy, everybody can be filthy, but even that is just like, yeah. Oh, I was going to say something, but I don't know how old, but it's just like, you know, he'll love you for a very long time, you know? Like, exactly. It's just like simple as that, you know?
But I think that's such a good point, because I think, for me, the idea of thirst and feminine desire is about creating a life. There's a richness to the imagination surrounding it that I think is different perhaps to just the way men or masculine leaning people think. So I think there is that difference that feeds into what we do as writers, kind of scenario making, that is really interesting, and having an object of desire that might be famous or well known is about projecting something positive about our desires onto them. So I just think it's really interesting, and you did that in such an interesting way that people really engaged with. So I think, I just wanted to ask you about it.
It's so funny, but Malachi's like, I made Malachi read a book that Kiki really likes, and girls are going crazy for it. Like, exactly. A man who reads a book that she likes. Wow.
I mean, that's what you're looking for. Yeah. You want someone who engages with you in those ways. But thinking more about kind of the storytelling aspects of what you do, you're kind of 10 toes into this kind of world of television and film. What do you think are the differences between visual storytelling and storytelling on the page? Maybe particularly when it comes to portraying romance, but outside of that as well.
The differences, it's so funny because I do take a lot from, like, with Honey Aspires, it is very visual in my description, and in my script I am very like descriptive, because with the slight touches and the looks I'm very descriptive, because I want the actors to like it's almost like I'm directing through the page, because I want the actors to kind of like portray that chemistry, because for me romance is all about, it's like you said, it's all about chemistry. Like, I can have the words on the page, but it's about the looks, it's about the gentle touches, and it's not necessarily sexual touches. For me, one of the hottest scenes that I've seen on screen is in my best friend's wedding, and you know what I'm going to talk about.
I do.
And you know, Julia Roberts being a menace, she has the ring of her best friend, her best friend's wedding ring, basically, that he's going to give to his wife on her own finger. There's a lot of chemistry, there's a lot to have a history, and he gently removes the ring off her finger with his mouth, with his teeth. And it's quiet, and it's intense, and it's hotter than any kiss. They don't kiss in the movie. They don't kiss in the movie, but it's hotter than a kiss, because it says everything about history. The fact that it's the ring that he's going to use to marry someone else, it's the look, it's the fact that they're not kissing, but it's so weirdly intimate. I think that is really what makes chemistry on screen. And even in I saw a GIF that reminded me of How to Use a Guy in 10 Days. And it's just, and I love that movie as well. And it's Matthew McConaughey just nuzzling against Kate Hudson. It's weird, just nuzzling against her. And it's just like this moment of like a man being disarmed enough to snuggle to a woman. And I feel like there's a lot of